Welcome to the Card Text, an unofficial mini-podcast about Marvel Champions at the LCG. We cover rules discussions regarding gameplay and aim to help fans of the game better understand the inner workings of their favorite Marvel card game. So I have to jump in here and mention two things. One, we missed talking about the uses keyword. Cards with the uses keyword in general will have entered play and will be removed from play and enter a discard pile after its last counter is removed and after its ability fully resolves. Basically, it will be snatched by the collector's interrupt. Secondly, a short while after we recorded the episode, we received an email about a card from Gamora's pack which can actually occupy a very uncommon third state of play, which is neither in nor out of play. Doesn't change a whole lot for the episode, but it is something we wanted to mention. Thanks. Welcome to episode 5 of the Card Text. I'm Bob, joined here by Theorel and Scott.
Hello, everybody.
So today we're going to be discussing in play, out of play. What elements are in play, what elements are out of play. We'll also be discussing, I think to a larger degree, the upcoming collector scenario from Galaxy's Most Wanted. A lot of people want to know what cards exactly that affects and to what extent that mechanism will impact cards and gameplay. I have a list, but I think, Scott, you put on one of our bullet points here that cards exist in either one state or another. It's either in play or out of play. I don't think there's an in-between, right?
No, not really. They're either in play or they're not. And if they're not, they're out of play. It's actually pretty simple.
Okay, and you did bring up the events there.
Yeah, I mean they explicitly resolve from out of play. Yeah, and they never actually enter play. And I think that's part of their streamlining of the rules. And in this case, I think it's actually a good thing.
So I did have a list, just so the listeners have that concrete list of things that are in play and out of play. So stuff that is out of play. We have the player hand. Whatever cards are in your hand are out of play. Your player deck. Your discard pile. The encounter deck is out of play. The encounter discard pile is out of play. Unrevealed cards in the villain deck. For example, if you're playing Rhino in Standard, that stage 1 will be in play, but the stage 2 underneath him is the unrevealed card, and that is out of play. Main scheme cards that are underneath a main scheme card that is in play are out of play. Set aside cards are out of play. Cards that are removed from the game are out of play.
One thing I might add to that is dealt face down cards. Face down boost card or a face down encounter card that's been dealt also be out of play.
Those are also out of play. Thank you, Thea. Stuff that is in play. So those are mainly non-event cards that have been played or put into play. So those are things like upgrades, allies, support cards. The top card of the villain deck is in play. The top card of the main scheme deck is in play.
Side schemes, minions, attachments.
And environments as well.
Obligations, the ones that stick around. I'm not so sure about the ones that don't.
So as far as I know, Caleb, the only thing we have about obligations and whether they're in play out of play is he said obligations as a card type enter play. I don't know if that really applies to the core set stuff.
That does seem like a relevant thing to resolve regarding the collector.
Right. So we would have to hear back from the developers that these actually enter play for a significant enough period that it would, interact.
Maybe only Strange's obligation enters play.
Yeah, for sure, Strange, his obligation can enter play. So that's the list as best we can put it together of in-play, out-of-play stuff. The obligations we're obviously going to need a little more clarification on. But yeah, let's move on to the collector. From the upcoming Galaxy's Most Wanted, the collector, the villain, stage 1 reads, he's an elder, as far as traits are concerned. Forced to interrupt when a card, player, or encounter would be placed into a discard pile from play, put it face up into the collection instead. The only shot we have of his main scheme, called the Grand Collection, 10 threshold for threat. It's got an action, which says a hero action. Choose to either exhaust your hero or spend 2 resources of any type. Cost arrow, discard 1 card from the collection to its owner's discard pile. Limit once per player per round. And then it has bold text. If there are at least 5 per player cards in the collection, or if this stage is completed, the players lose the game. So a character like Black Widow, one of the questions that may come up is, do preparation cards still trigger if they end up in the collection.
In particular, Black Widow's preparations clearly are going to be going into the collection because they are in play, and then when you trigger them, you discard them. So they are a card which are being placed into a discard pile from play, and therefore the collector puts them in his collection. I think the question is, because the collector put that card into his collection, have you successfully paid the cost? I lean towards it being true, that it would work.
The card is discarded from play. It just doesn't hit your discard pile, it goes straight to the collection. So
if a card didn't hit the discard pile, was it really discarded? Because that's a question that everybody wants to know the answer to.
yeah, so it's just going to hinge on them saying, yeah, if you discard from play, that's good enough to meet the condition there, the cost on a preparation card.
I think the part that collector's ability replaces is the card entering the discard pile, not it being discarded. So you are still considered to have discarded the card and therefore paid the cost.
That's the way I feel about it too.
Right. So next question in regard to the collector scenario. Can make the call play an ally from the collection?
No. The collection is not your discard pile.
So make the call specifically targets any player's discard pile. The collection is not mentioned in make the call, therefore it doesn't interact with the collection's discard pile or the collection.
The collection in particular maybe is not a discard pile.
Right.
I think it's going to be just the collection, a set of cards that we don't know whether they're in play or out of play at this point, but they are not a discard pile, I think.
They need to be out of play, because otherwise the collector would immediately place them in his collection whenever you...
That's true. Yes, they must be out of play.
So next question. Can you play Lockjaw from the collection?
No. Same reason. It's Lockjaw it's basically you play him from your discard pile. The collection isn't your discard pile, so you can't use his ability.
Following question. Do defeated villain or main scheme stages end up in the collection?
That one's going to be a no, because they're go to a different out of play area.
They're removed from the game.
So doesn't count. Next question. Can a rapid response prevent an ally from being put into the collection?
No. Rapid response is after an ally you control is defeated, discard rapid response, put that ally into play from your discard pile and deal 1 damage to it. So it seems that with rapid response, the card actually has to enter the discard pile for you to be able to pull it back.
But if the collector is out, that can't actually happen, right?
Yeah, because collector's ability interrupts that process, stops it from entering the discard pile, puts it into the collection instead.
Okay, next question. What cards can avoid being sent to the collection?
In general, if a card were going to avoid going to the collection, it would require there to be an interrupt that prevents it from going to the discard pile. So we have a couple of examples of that.
All of the examples we've got are allies. So one example is Clear, protection ally, and she has the ability interrupt. When Clear is defeated, shuffle her into her owner's deck. That kicks in before collector's ability because it's when she's defeated, when that process of defeat starts, and then you shuffle her into your deck, and therefore she never goes into your discard pile, and therefore collector's ability never triggers. So the next one is Red Dagger, which is Ms. Marvel's signature ally. His ability is interrupt. When Red Dagger is defeated, spend 2 resources of different types and deal 2 damage to an enemy and return Red Dagger to your hand. Similarly to Clear, his interrupt triggers when the defeat process starts. Assuming you have the 2 resources of different types to spend, you can pay those, deal the damage, he comes back to your hand, he never hits your discard pile, and therefore collector's ability never triggers putting you in the collection. The next one is Hellcat, She-Hulk's signature ally. This one is slightly different in that it doesn't interrupt the defeat process because her ability is action, return Hellcat to your hand. So this is something you've got to do preemptively. It's not a reactive thing. You've got to be in the position where you can see that Hellcat is going to get discarded at some point in the near future, you take the action to return her to your hand. The final ally that we know can avoid being collected is Mockingbird, the signature ally version from Hawkeye's deck, and her ability is Interrupt. When the villain initiates an attack against you, spend one resource of any type and return Mockingbird to your hand. Prevent all damage from this attack. So again, like Hellcat, it's not something that reactively stops the collection from happening. It's something where you've got to proactively do something that prevents her from ending up getting collected. Effectively, her ability is like blocking with her, and instead you're just spending a resource and bringing her back to handing, and you just prevent the damage.
In order for these cards to work the way we just said, that does mean that there has to be some kind of a distinction between those, the defeat and the place into discard pile. For Clea and for Red Dagger, a defeat includes a discard, which implicitly includes placing the card into the discard pile, which is the point where the collector's forced interrupt happens. The interrupt, the defeat, can take precedence over the forced interrupt of the place in discard pile.
Looking at these abilities, it must be, as Theo said, two distinct things, otherwise it doesn't seem to work.
It's worth noting that I don't think we've had a distinction between those two before. Now we have the other hard question. Are cards attached to other cards, specifically Bruno and Hawkeye's Quiver, considered in play? And then second half of that question then, do they count for the collector's ability?
Right, yeah, because they're attached. Attached cards are in play.
That's the first bullet point under attached to rules reference, page 3.
Once a card is attached, it remains in play until either the element it is attached to leaves play, in which case the attached card is discarded, or an ability or game effect causes the attached card to leave play. So yeah.
It's possible that Bruno's cards are not considered to be in play. This would go back to the side schemes. Marked for Death, which has Mockingbird placed face up underneath it, and she is in play. And then we have the Hydra Prison, which has the allies placed face down. It seems like they are not in play. Neither of them use the word attached. They both use place under.
Whereas Bruno does use the word attach.
Bruno uses the word attach, but it's possible that they intend it to be that face down cards are not in play. Face up cards are in play, and that the attached part is not maybe the important element to that. I think the rules say they are, but I don't think that they meant them to be.
We're just going to have to settle on being uncertain as to whether those cards are in play or not and affected by the collector's collection.
Yeah, until we get a ruling on it.
Fortunately for Bruno and the collector side, that's not as important because those cards don't leave play very much.
Yeah, I can't remember which treachery it is, but there is one that causes you to discard I think it's support or upgrade.
So cutoff card could hit Bruno.
You could be in the situation where the only persona you have out is Bruno, and your obligation comes up. And in that situation, it's not clear whether the cards under Bruno would go to the collection or not. But then if they're not, where do they go?
Well, they would just go to your discard pile if they weren't considered to be in play, right? Not a problem with cards entering your discard pile. I think the whole attach in play thing is supposed to be really for upgrades. It's cards that you've played that end up attached to things. That feels to me like the intended target for that, not Hawkeye's Quiver. Maybe it's a templating problem. Maybe attach was just the wrong word to use there. I think that you are correct. Rules as written. I think rules as written are clear. There's really no other way to read it. It's just, I think it's wrong.
If the arrows onto Quiver are in play, then that actually makes Quiver really bad, because that is the only way events are ever going to end up in the collection.
So don't use the Quiver if you play Hawkeye against the collector. So let's do just a quick recap. So for Bruno, in terms of playing against the collector, if you play Bruno as Ms. Marvel and Bruno gets discarded from play, either via treachery or some other card that we don't know about yet, what is the player advised to do by us?
Rules as written, any cards under Bruno go to the collection.
And we feel more strongly about the Quiver, right? The arrows on the Quiver, whether it's after you play them or if something happens to remove an event attached to the Quiver, or if something removes the Quiver itself, then those cards all go to the collection.
I agree. I think those are the rules as written.
Yeah, pending further clarification about all that. So that concludes the episode of In Play, Out of Play. I did want to mention thanks to Mr. L and Scarlet Rhodey, both for the input for this episode. Hopefully we covered those questions. Let us know if we did address them. If we didn't, let us know on our Discord or at thecardtextpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for coming, guys. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Theo.
Thanks for everything you do for this.
Yeah, cheers.
We hope that was informative. Thanks to Kennedy Hawk and everyone at Marvel Champions Monthly for graciously hosting us. Tune in for our next episode next month on the latest rulings, news, and rules conundrums. Thanks to my distinguished colleagues, Theo Rell and Scott, for joining. And remember, when you would rather not read the rules reference, listen to the card text instead.